Adventure on Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
Wake up, America! It's time for the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY.com, West Palm Beach's #1 internet radio station. Here's your host, the Pipeman.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman W4CY Radio, and I'm here with our next guest, who is an amazing drummer, and there's some great new music we're going to talk about. So let's welcome to the show, Tommy McKinnon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Pipeman?
I'm doing great. First thing I want to say right off the bat, before we talk about anything else, because this is the most important part, is why does Bruce love the sound of your drums so much?
I've been trying to figure it out. I was under the understanding that cats have an acute sense of hearing, but he's always been a music cat. And whenever, even if I practice on a practice pad, he's always sitting right by. And then when I drum, sometimes he's on the chair behind me, just napping.
I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think he likes the vibes, and then maybe when I'm playing, I'm really relaxed, and he just digs it.
Maybe it almost feels like to him like purring when the beating of the drums is happening.
That's possible. Yeah, I'm not sure, but he loves it. So
there you go.
Yeah.
And I had to bring it up because I saw that, and I was like, that's definitely interview material that probably nobody else would bring up.
Oh, right on. Yeah. He's a metal cat.
There you go. And my daughter, she has 2 cats, and I'm sure if I call her up after an interview, she'd be like, yeah, no, my cats would be running for the hills. But that,
he hates the vacuum.
Well, see that? And I think, but though the running from the music, I think that may be like a representative of her. Maybe, a lot of times our animals, they share our personality.
Oh, totally.
So what I want to see next is like you got to do a TikTok where Bruce is playing the drums with you.
Yeah, I have to figure out how to make that. That'd be funny.
Right? That would be totally funny.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this badass new album by Derelict. Man, first of all, your drumming, I'm old school, like from the beginning of all this stuff. And your drumming reminds me of like my favorite drummers in the 80s that were starting this whole type of music.
Well, that's funny you say that because I've been listening to death metal pretty much since the beginning as well, right? So I think that the first time I headbanged to Eastside Legion, I must have been 9 years old.
Wow.
And so I kind of, I grew up mostly listening to like hair bands and thrash metal, whatever, everything from the 70s. I was always a Morbid Angel, Death, Suffocation type fan. And definitely when I was coming up as a player, late 90s and after, like I listened to all those guys, right? Dave Colruss and Gene Oldland and Mickey D. Like if you think heavy metal, Mickey D is definitely a guy. Like I learned a lot of King Diamond songs when I was learning how to play.
There you go.
So that's all in there. And for me, it's like, well, these guys have been around forever. They made records that sold and that are still praised. So for me, it's like, well, there's the school, right? You want any better teacher? And then eventually, even as I went on tour and all that stuff, I ended up touring and meeting up with a bunch of those guys and having a chance to exchange, either a few words or spend a few weeks on the road. And so it all kind of came together eventually. And it's part of who I am. It's part of my playing.
It's funny because I played drums for 9 years as a kid until like high school. And then I met, a bunch of the old school drummers, and I was at shows. I'm like, yeah, I fucking suck. I'm because I was
buddy.
like, I'm looking at these guys and I'm going, man, there's no way I could drum like that. And you kind of gave me, it's funny because you kind of gave me a little trigger of trauma with the practice pad. Because I remember my dad would never get me a drum set till like way later. So I went for years only playing on practice pad and freaking hated it.
Yeah. It's kind of a brutal one for children, or teenagers. For me, my practice, I didn't even have a practice pad until later. Like I started out just with a kit. I basically just wanted something to beat on that wasn't going to hurt anybody. And my first practice pad, I was using my bed, and I had this blanket that had little squares on it. So I used the squares for like target practice or whatever. Anyway,
that's cool. Yeah. That's a cool technique right there. I like that.
You know what? It's just something before coming into drumming when I was about 14, 15, I didn't really know anything else. I wasn't into sports. I wasn't into anything. And then when I found that out, it was just everything, it was all my attention was focused on that. So.
And then you brought up something before that would never, during the 80s, we would never say both things in one sentence where we would mention hair metal and thrash. The closest would come to that, okay, check this out. Back in the day, you've probably seen this maybe too. So if anybody wore a Motley Crue shirt to a Slayer show in LA back in the day, you would take the shirt from the kid, throw it up to Tom, and he would burn it on stage.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. That's amazing. I never heard that one before, but I'm not surprised.
Right?
Well, I heard like guys in Quebec City getting punched in the head for wearing spandex and stuff like that. Yeah. But, I came up in the 90s, right? So like I'm born in the 80s, but, I came around all that stuff a little later. So it was kind of like grunge was already pretty big by the time I found out about King Diamond. So for me, it was just anything from 1971 or even like 66, like the old Led Zeppelin, anything from Led Zepp to Morbid Angel was just one string of, I lived in a small town and I had a CD player and a tape deck. And for me, it was just one big progression, and I just listened to everything depending on the mood I was. I just loved electric guitar and solos and, it's just, that's just it. Yeah.
It's funny you should say that too, because I was just talking about that in the last interview. Okay, so recently I interviewed John Lodge from the Moody Blues. Right. And I said to him, I'm like, you know how I know about your band? Because I had a brother that was 11 years older than me, and I rifled through his albums, and I used to steal his albums, and yours is one that I stole. And he goes, yeah, thank God for older brothers, or we'd have no fans, because that's how we got our fan base.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I didn't have an older brother, but my best friend growing up did have an older brother who was into everything, and he had like a whole box of cassettes, and so I'd bring him Virgin tapes, and he would make me mixes and shit, and that's how I got into all that stuff. Sabotage and whatever. Yeah.
And I'll tell you too. Okay, so before there was a such thing as thrash, and before there was such thing as hair metal, I saw Motley Crue at the Roxy, 1980, I think it was, before their album came out, and they were not glam at all.
Wow.
They weren't glam at all. They were like horror punk. Like it was, and that's really, so you talk about the progression. I went through that same progression. I went from like the old school rock, which is all you had, and then you had like the British Invasion, the Maiden, the Priest, and then we started to have the other bands that weren't thrash yet, weren't hair metal yet. It was just LA bands. And
Right.
Motley Crue was like the heaviest band there was in LA until those first Metallica and Slayer shows. But you know, it's interesting because we should have all gotten along. And I'm so happy that now in 2024, all metalheads can get along.
I think that was a long way coming, you know.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a culture shift that happened over the last probably 10 years or so, where gatekeeping is just not really happening anymore, you know.
I hated it then.
I'm not sure what happened exactly. I think, for me, it was always, you know, about openness and just having a good time, you know. But I don't know. Like, I in the tech debt years, you know, coming up in the 2000s when I was doing a lot of touring, the scene was already like a lot more female in bands. You know, there's a lot more fusion, you know, kind of bills where you'd have metalcore with death metal and, you know, everything in between. So for me, it's more about, you know, are these guys cool to hang out with or not, right? So,
exactly, you know, and I used to think you used to have to hide stuff. Okay, so it's like, I remember when I started getting into Slayer, my friends were like, okay, we're going to have to burn all your Motley Crue shit. I'm like, you're not burning it. No, yes, we are, you know, and then people would say, yeah, in reference to what you're saying about females, that, yeah, the only females in metal are in hair metal, and they're not females, you know. You know, but I can tell you now, I think the most badass metalheads a lot of times are females. You know, you take people like Ginger, or, you know, Courtney from Spirit Box, or, you know, New Year's Day, or, I mean, there's Butcher Babies. There's so many that I can name that, man, I don't know. I think
Becky with Merciful Fate too.
Yeah. And and you're gonna hate this. I saw Merciful Fate at the Troubadour in the 80s.
Oh, I wish I only saw King Diamond. The last Merciful Fate tour, they never made it to Canada. So yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, I saw the last one. God bless you. I saw the last one. Merciful Fate played at, I think it was Hellfest. I'm trying that I was at. That they played at, but
but I hope they come to Vancouver when the new album comes out in a couple of years there.
Yeah, and see, I think your new album here, that's why I'm bringing all this stuff up, because it does give me old school vibes, like the talent behind. Because one of the things I find nowadays is there's a lot of metal bands that just sound exactly the same. And yours just gave me the vibe of old school, where, you know, you were in the same genre, but nobody sounded the same, you know. Possessed, Dark Angel, Slayer, Exodus, they all did not sound the same. You could tell them apart easily. I could know a Possessed song in like 3 seconds max, you know?
So, I think it's the Montreal influence, you know, because we're all over the place now, but we're all originally kind of a band from Montreal. Sounds very Montreal-like, you know, Cryptopsy and Araxis, you know, so there was always a big melting pot there of like New York death metal with thrash, you know, and like a little bit of new school, but just I would say more, it's like modern, right? It's not like trendy new school. It's more like a modern touch to it. So, it's pretty fun. They're great guys to work with too, yeah.
I love the combining of genres, like the blending of genres, which we couldn't do back in the day. I think it just makes better music and a more unique sound. And I think it brings us back to the days of music from the 60s and 70s, but making it much heavier, you know. But that music back then was very much musician based type of music. And, I think that's what you're bringing to the table too. It's like, it's not just making it loud and fast, it's making it loud, fast, but also have musical genius to it and a groove to it and something you can like sink your teeth into.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think there's two kinds of bands if you want to like break it down. Like there's the attitude bands and there's the musician bands, right? So it's like Derelict is definitely music oriented, where it's less about the looks and the pyrotechnics and whatever, and really more about the chops and the overall songwriting.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, can you remember that one point in time where you knew that being a drummer is where you needed to be for like the rest of your life?
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, you bring this up. So I started playing in 1998, and I got the drums in sometime in April, and it took me about a month to be able to nail down a 4/4 beat. And I got really frustrated, so I would play for 5 minutes and throw the sticks off and think I suck. Go home, go upstairs, watch some TV, eat a little ice cream, and then I'd come downstairs, play it again. And I just kept going back to it. And after about a month of like struggling and hating everything about it, uh, I remember one night I was alone at home. So I lived in my parents' basement and I had my drums in my room. And I was alone at home that one night and it just kind of locked in. And I played for like 3 hours nonstop. And I'm sure what I played wasn't all that great, but it felt good. And I just kept getting inspired. It's as if something took control of me, and it just. And then at that moment, I was like, "Wow, this is it! Like this is what I like," And then from then on, it was just getting more and more enriching. And then the second key moment, I think, is my first show.
Yeah.
I played I had this local band with a couple high school buddies, and we went to jam, blues jam, where like it was not really a blues jam. It was like all the guys from our town that could play, that were in cover bands and blues bands or whatever. They all got together and we got invited, and they just we just sit around playing Sabbath and Metallica and whatever all night, just getting fucking slammed. And we got there and they told us, guys, if you want to play, like just get it done. And so we went back, we got our shit, we loaded it in my buddy's tiny Ford Escort. We got back, we set up on stage. We didn't have a bass player at that point. It was just two guitars, a drums, and and a vocalist. And we played 3 songs. I think we had like, yeah, we only had 3 songs at that point. So we played our 3 songs, and I was nervous as all get out. I was a pretty introverted kid at that point, and I broke down in the middle of 2 out of 3 songs.
Oh,
But the guys in the crowd, they were all like older dudes, been playing for a while, and they liked it, and they were cheering us and everything. And then that feeling, I think the crowd response and that sort of validation, pure validation that came with it is what drove me. And I was like, after that, I was kind of craving it. I was like, let's play some shows, and then it all went from there. Yeah.
what I love about that story is so many musicians, contrary to what people would think, are introverts.
Mhm.
But the thing that's cool is being an introvert, you still thrive on that feedback from the audience. It's like you're in your own zone. You're in your own zone, but at the same time, there's this other zone, the audience, that's feeding into you that just I think you kind of forget that you're even up there with this crowd, and what would normally give you like trauma, the extrovert part, you don't really notice because you get into zone and you're not really there. It's like an out of body experience.
Yeah, definitely. There's something higher. Like not to get all like esoteric or anything. There's definitely something spiritual, and there's definitely some sort of community that you can have this experience with total strangers, and it's all the music is the vector of that,
Yeah.
and
Hun-
yeah, having an audience is the main thing. Like whether you're playing for your cat or you're playing for two people or 100,000, it's that connection with the audience at the end of the day that makes it all make sense.
Absolutely. 100%. Which is why, for me, I think we wouldn't be so angry and depressed and everything else that we are right now if we didn't have that 2-year lockdown of music.
Right.
There's no release, and then these live streams, which were a cool idea and great thing and look good, but not the same as being in the midst of it. And I'd look at bands, I'm like, man, that must be really hard to perform like a normal show, and you're not performing for anybody.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's going to be the filming crew that's going to be there and whatever. I didn't have that experience. I had a completely different lockdown. I'm in the military, so I was
Mm,
doing military things. But as far as the post pandemic rebound, though, like I'm really impressed, and it's been amazing to go back to shows and see some of my buddies when they're in tour and they come to town, and seeing how how hype and excited and just awesome everybody is, and just happy to be there. Like I feel like there's less of that bullshit. Like, oh, I don't like your band, you don't like my band. And it's just like everybody's just happy to have a good time. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Well,
kind of cool for that.
that's like me during the lockdown. I'm like, I don't care if some fifth grader gets on stage with a recorder. I'm going to that live show. It doesn't
That's
matter
it.
what it is, and we're all together. And I think that if you're going to take a positive out of the lockdown, I think it kind of created a higher appreciation for live music because people were taking it for granted.
Yeah, I think taking it for granted and thinking, oh well, yeah, what's the point? Everything's online. Well, we just had, a couple of years of everything's online, and it gets pretty fucking lonely and boring, right?
No
It's not the
doubt.
same at all, right? So yeah, that human connection has to happen in real time. So like, social media and all that stuff, I'm all for it. I mean, it's super useful. There's also a lot of junk, right? Fake accounts and
Hmm.
whatever, and spamming. But at the end of the day, it's about the people behind it, right? So it's good to get together with a crowd and just rub elbows with people and have a good time, right?
Yeah. Now, would you say too that this new album, it's the songwriting part of it and putting it all together? Do you, as musicians, feel that you're more creative now after that lockdown and a revived like energy towards that creative process?
It's hard to speak for everybody, but my experience during the lockdown, I had a while where I was working from home as well, and I went and got an electric guitar, and then I started teaching myself how to play. Right, like so I went to school, so I know theory, and I learned a few riffs, and I've been messing around, and so now I started writing my own stuff. So now that I've got a freedom I didn't have before. So there's two parts to that where like I learned how to play guitar and bass, and it's not amazing, but I'm getting there. And then I'm learning how to produce my own stuff. So now I have this kind of like total vehicle for like making albums whenever I feel like it. And so that's what I spend all my spare time doing is producing
Nice.
stuff. And yeah, and then the drumming aspect. Yeah, I was kind of burned out actually, and has nothing to do with the pandemic. There's some shit going on, and so I got kind of a burnout between 2019 and like 2021 or so. Uh, and then I started practicing again, and then like so in my case, the passion's totally back and
Nice.
revives again, and so I'm in I've just been starting to make more projects. So I think one of the things that happened for me moving on to the West Coast and kind of like getting cut off from everything is like I took more on more kind of like freedom on my own part, I guess, to just
Mm,
be my own creative force, and then the Derelict cooperation happened out of the blue, and it's been an amazing experience. And we're like I was saying in another interview, I really feel like I'm part of a band, even though we're all scattered all over the world,
hmm.
because the camaraderie is there. We talk every week. We send each other jokes and whatever, and it's just kind of cool. So even though
I
I don't
love
have
it.
that jam space, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, kind of like reunion to look up to, like I still feel like I'm part of it, this band full on, and it's pretty enriching. So yeah, it's pretty cool, man. Like I'm in a good spot in early 40s. I got my drum set up at home, ready to record at any time. I just turn it on and it just works. And so I'm
I
pretty
love it.
pretty fortunate that way, man. So like the road aspect of it, I kind of miss it right now. I have a day job in an office that feels pretty good, so I'm not complaining. Like obviously, if I had a chance to go back on tour and just do that full time, I'd probably take it. But
Yeah.
right now, it's kind of like the longer I wait, the less and less likely it becomes. So, yeah, having the chance to work with a band like Derelict and my other projects right now that are in development, it's pretty awesome. So it's definitely like the show must go on kind of thing. But it's definitely kind of a progression. And I
Yeah.
think the next Derelict album is going to be even better because now we know a lot of technical things we didn't know going into it, and the next album is going to sound like really fucking good, I think.
I love it. Because I got to tell you, too, I watched both video versions of the Escapist. The one I
Also,
watched the one where you do the drum through,
yeah,
and I was like, that I like that video because I was like, man, that's some badass drumming. Like, I like being able to watch you do the double bass and everything, and just you're just so into it. And like, I think everybody has to check it out. And I assume the rest of the album is even just as badass. Uh, how can people check you out, check Derelict out, check out the new album, get it, and all the info, connect on socials, all that good stuff.
yeah. So for the band, we have Bandcamp. So Derelict Metal at Bandcamp, I think, and the album is Versus Entropy. Uh, they have their own YouTube channel. I think they're on all streaming platforms as well, Spotify and so on. So as long as you check out the band, I know there's a couple of Derelict related music thing out there. So Derelict Metal is probably a good keyword for search and so on. Definitely Bandcamp's great. YouTube, streaming, Apple Music, Spotify. They have the stroke with the CDs. They're on every streaming platform. As far as my own stuff, my YouTube I think is the best because it's got all the links to my other things, fan page and whatever. And my YouTube channel is called Tommy McKinnon Drumming Channel. So if you
Nice.
look me up by name, you can pretty easily find me. I'm in the middle of developing that channel. It's kind of time consuming to do all that and all the editing and all that stuff. So I do my best to keep up and produce new stuff. So I've got another playthrough. I'm preparing right now for sorry, Derelict, and it's gonna be the probably the third and last. There's one that came out, the versus Entropy, the song. I
Hmm.
came out on sickdrummer.com as well. So I sent it out to them, and they Ian. I reached out to Ian, and we made a deal. So I sent them the video. So it's on there. It's on my channel as well. So lots of ways to check it out. All you got to do is look around a bit.
Absolutely. And they definitely should check out your YouTube channel because you got a lot of cool stuff on there. It's not just,
I appreciate it.
your typical channel. So there's a lot of cool things that if you're just a drummer or love drummers, it's a great resource in my opinion.
I appreciate it, man.
Anything else you want to share with the listeners we haven't covered?
Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you for taking the time tuning in, and thank you, Mr. Pipeman, for inviting me over. And yeah, you should definitely check out Derelict versus Entropy. That's been out for a couple of months. I have other albums too. If people that are watching haven't listened to, you like death metal, you can check out my previous band called AKURION. We have one album called "Come Forth to Me," AKURION with Mike DeSalvo, and I'll be posting updates on. I've got some stuff in the works right now, so I'll try to make it as available as possible. But it's kind of too early right now. But those would be the two I would say. Check those out.
Nice. Well, thanks for making us great music, and of course, Bruce the Cat approves. So everybody listening needs to approve too. If Bruce likes it, you're going to like it. And thanks for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Hey, take care, buddy.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.